I mean, ultimately, that's when I look at the event horizon of artificial intelligence, it's why? Why would we're so flawed. We're not going to get our shit together by the time artificial intelligence is given birth to.
Well, that all goes to what we build. I mean, if we build artificial intelligence that is independent of us and seems conscious and is more powerful than us, well, then we have built in the limit, we have essentially built a god that we now have to be in relationship to, and hopefully that's works out well for us. And it's very easy to see how it might not. I think there are even scarier cases than that, though. We could build something that has godlike power, but there's no reason to think it's conscious. It's no more conscious than our current computers, which is to say that intelligence and consciousness may be separable phenomena. Intelligence can scale, but consciousness need not come along for the ride. And that, for me, is the worst case scenario, because if we inherit all of the danger of the power of this system being misaligned with our interests. We could build something that's godlike in its power, and yet we could essentially be canceling the prospects of the evolution of consciousness. Because if this thing wipes us out, I think it's Nick Bostrom, the philosopher who wrote a great book on this entitled Superintelligence. I think he calls this the Disneyland without children. I mean, basically, we could build this incredibly powerful, intelligent landscape that continues to refine itself and its own powers in who knows what ways perhaps that are unimaginable to us, and yet the lights aren't on. There's nothing that it's like to be this machine or system of machines in the way that there's probably nothing that it's like to be the internet right now. You think of all that's going on the internet. I don't think the internet is conscious of any of it right now. The question is, could the internet become conscious of what it's thinking? And I think there's no reason to think it couldn't. It's just we don't understand the physical basis of consciousness yet.
The real question is, why would it do anything? I mean, if it doesn't have any of the biological motivations that people have to breed and to stay alive and to, fight or flight and to be nervous and this desire to carry on our genes. I mean, if you really did build the ultimate supercomputer, artificial intelligence that was beyond our capacity for reason and understanding, wouldn't it just do nothing? Because everything is pointless.
Well, no, but we would do...
We would program it.
It would do whatever we asked it to do initially, right? I mean, things we program now have goals. Right, your thermostat is trying to regulate the temperature in the room, and when it gets too warm, it kicks on the air, and when it gets too cold, it kicks on the heat. And I mean, that's a goal, right? And so everything we build that's automated has goals explicitly programmed into it. And when you're talking about a truly intelligent machine, it will discover goals that you have never programmed into it that are intermediate to the goal that you have programmed. So if the goal of this machine is to pick up all the trash in this room, and you physically try to stop it, well, then it's going to try to get around you to pick up the rest of the trash in the room, right? So it's I mean, this is probably already true of a Roomba, right? I actually don't have a Roomba, but if you put something in the way of the Roomba, it's going to get around the thing you have put in its way so that it can get to the rest of the room. So that's an intermediate goal, and some of these goals need never have been explicitly thought about or represented, which is to say programmed into it, and yet they're formed by the fact that the thing has a long-term goal. And one of the concerns is that we could build something that has a long-term goal, build something that's super powerful, that has a long-term goal which in principle is benign, right? It's like this is something we want, and yet it could discover instrumental goals that are deeply hostile to what we want. I mean, the thing doesn't have common sense, right? We haven't figured out how to build common sense into the machine. So, I mean, there's just cartoon examples of this kind of thing, but like one example that Elon used when he first was expressing fears about this is just, if you built a machine, the only goal of which was to cancel spam, right? No more. We want no more spam. Get rid of the spam. well, an easy way to get rid of spam is just kill all the people, right? Now, that's a crazy thing to think, but it's not, unless you've closed the door to that intermediate goal, there's no reason to think that a super powerful machine couldn't form such a goal.
My question would be, if this super powerful machine has the ability to create new super powerful machines, would it use the same mandate? Would it still try to follow the original programming, or would it realize that our original programming is only instrumental to the success of the human race, and it might think the human race is ridiculous and preposterous, and why not just program something that it thinks is the ultimate intelligence, something beyond our capacity for reason and understanding now? And that thing, I would wonder, in the absence of any sort of biological motivations, in the absence do you think of all the things that we do? I mean, you break it down to what motivates people to get out of bed, what motivates people to do good, our sense of community, the desire to breed, the social status, all these different things that motivate people to do things. Remove all of those, and what actions would it take, and why?
Well, I think you want to build it in a way that is focused on our well-being. And so, for instance, I had Stuart Russell on my podcast. He's a computer scientist at Berkeley, who, unlike many computer scientists, takes this problem really seriously and has thought a lot about it. And in his lab, I believe they're working on a way of thinking about safety that is open-ended and flexible without pretending we have any of the right answers in the near term or likely to have them. So you want to build a system that wants to know what you want, right, at each point. So that's tracking what humanity wants in terms of its goals, and wants to stay aligned with whatever it is we want. Wants to learn from what we seem to want based on our behavior, but and so there could be some kind of clarifying function where we can get our priorities more aligned in dialogue with the super intelligent machine. But the bottom line is, it always wants to. It doesn't think it knows what we want, and it continually wants to keep approximating better and better what we want. And so, from my point of view, the most crucial thing is you always want the door to remain open to the statement, wait, that's not what I wanted, right? Like you want to be in the presence of this godlike superpower that will always take direction from you when you say, wait, that's not going in the right direction. And so the fear is we could build something that is just not amenable to being controlled in that way.
And my number one fear over the last year has been artificial intelligence.
Oh, I'm tremendously troubled by it, too.
I'm more scared of it every day. Every day I wake up thinking, are we just sleeping while this thing is about to go live, and we literally are in a fucking Terminator movie?
I think it's both better and worse than that. It's happening already. And because it's not robots, we don't see it.
Right, it's happening in your phone.
Yeah,
there's AI that operates.
It's your phone.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's AI, it's not a GI.
Right.
So
a G being?
General.
Okay.
So the fear, the one that we have...
Sentient.
Yeah, that the thing is smart enough to start thinking on its own, and that it might come up with its own objectives.
It might actually be creative.
It might be creative and either the paperclip problem is you tell it to make as many paperclips as possible, and it sees your attempt to turn it off or reprogram it as an obstacle to making paperclips, and it just starts liquidating the universe. So that's not a malevolent AI. That's a confused AI.
Right.
Malevolent AI is also possible, but what we've got is a baby version. The algorithms causing us to become addicted to our phones and to do damage to our lives is AI. These are algorithms that are developing, and frankly, it doesn't even matter whether people are reprogramming them or whether they are reprogramming themselves, and it is undoubtedly a mixture. What we have is an evolutionary system that the winner will be the site that manages to capture your attention in the face of competitors who are trying to do the same thing, and they will build anything and everything into that algorithm to get you to do it, which means there's nothing in your life that's sacred, right? Your life can be liquidated to get you addicted to that site on the phone. What we have now is a case where the algorithms aren't so good that we can't have this conversation, recognize that this is a danger we've created for ourselves, and address it. We could address it now. But if we don't realize that the phone algorithm addiction problem this is the warning shot. This is the place where we get a chance to recognize where we're headed and deal with it before it's AGI. If we don't do that, everybody who's serious and has thought about this question has had the same oh shit rational or conclusion, is that there's no stopping this. We can rationally debate how far off it is, but once it gets going, there's essentially no good way out.
And there's no one that's going to agree to stop right now.
Right.
There's just too much competition involved in terms of there's so many resources that are on the line. There's so much resources, there's so much power, there's so much money on the line to see who can come up with the best version of this and do it the quickest. And it's this mad race towards the edge of a cliff, and no one exactly knows whether or not we're going to be able to use the brakes.
Right. And so in some ways, I think this is the ultimate demonstration of where we are and what we must contemplate in order to save ourselves. Because if we can agree that the AI problem has the potential to destroy us, and that given time it will have the power to destroy us, and that we are vague at best on what mechanisms might prevent it from doing so, but then we've got this loophole, which is, well, suppose you took 99% of the AI projects and managed to correctly build in some algorithm that prevented them from going rogue in one way or the other, but somebody else decides not to. So we have to confront this at the level of what is allowed. Right? I don't like hearing myself say that, because I hear people turning off on the other end when they hear, oh, he doesn't want to allow us to innovate. But
for the survival of the species, I think it's imperative. You have to think about it that way.
We have no choice.
I'm just so scared that we're caught up in all this other nonsense, and we're thinking about so much stupid shit in our life, like, whether or not Kim and Kanye stay together. And in the middle of all this, there's a lab right now, and they're connecting these wires and connecting these dots and reprogramming and accelerating the evolution of this thing, and it's not going to turn off. And that life as we know it, we only have a few years left of this. I really feel like we're in a fucking science fiction movie, and we're at the beginning of the movie where everything's great.
Right.
It's, we got problems. We got a lot of dudes out there pinching butts, and there's some dudes are pretty rapey, and we got rid of Kevin Spacey, got taken out of that movie. We're doing pretty good.
Right.
And then in the meanwhile, there's fucking robots that are being built by Boston Dynamics that does backflips, and they're going to be able to think for themselves, and they're going to have machine guns for hands.
Right.
And their body's going to be filled with bullets.
What could go wrong?
It's fucking crazy, because it's happening at such an accelerated rate that it's literally when I'll be sitting around, I'll be playing with my kids, I'll be hanging out, and I'll be like, "Fuck, are they making robots right now? Are we like a year away from this being a real problem?"
Well, this is kind of what I'm getting at, is that the AI problem, in some ways, maybe it's good, because it's causing us to be able to focus on one of these hazards to us that you can't. Once you've seen why this is a risk, once you've really made eye contact with it, you can't talk yourself into why it's safe, right? Because it can't possibly be. Even if 99% of them are safe, 1% is enough to create the problem. So once you've got that information, you can then begin to extrapolate to all of the other problems that don't have the same intrigue around them. There's something, Sam Harris makes the point that as you talk about the AI apocalypse, it is simultaneously horrifying but kind of fun to get into, because because it is sort of sci-fi-ish and all. But the whole landscape that we have built, right? Our socio-political landscape was built by people who had never heard of Darwinism. There was no Darwinism. They didn't know. And so they built a bunch of ecosystems in which stuff evolves, and they didn't know to worry about it. So the AI problem is a very concentrated version of a very general problem, which is if you build a habitat and you install into it those features which cause evolution to occur, it will occur. And what it will create is entirely a question of what the niches look like that you have left open. So we are living that. We are suffering the consequence of an economic environment that is evolutionary, that creates giant rent-seeking monsters who are liquidating our well-being and putting it into their bank accounts. We've created a political apparatus that has the same characteristics, and now we're facing a robot version that actually has the potential to very rapidly push us over the cliff.
There are a bunch of questions next to or adjacent to general artificial intelligence that have not gotten enough alarm because, in fact, there's a crowding out of mindshare. I think that we don't really appreciate how rare the concept of selection is in the machines and creations that we make. So in general, if I have two cars in the driveway, I don't worry that if the moon is in the right place in the sky and the mood is just right, that there'll be a third car at a later point, because in general, I have to go to a factory to get a new car. I don't have a reproductive system built into my sedan. Now, almost all of the other physiological systems, what are there, perhaps 11, have a mirror. So my car has a brain, so it's got a neurological system, it's got a skeletal system, and it's steel, but it lacks a reproductive system. So you can ask the question, are humans capable of making any machines that are really self-replicative? And the fact of the matter is that it's very tough to do at the atomic layer, but there is a command in many computer languages called spawn. And spawn can effectively create daughter programs from a running program. Now, as soon as you have the ability to reproduce, you have the possibility that systems of selective pressures can act, because the abstraction of life will be just as easily handled whether it's based in our nucleotides and our ACTs and Gs, or whether it's based in our bits and our computer programs. So one of the great dangers is that we will end up doing is creating artificial life, allowing systems of selective pressures to act on it, and finding that we have been evolving computer programs that we may have no easy ability to terminate, even if they're not fully intelligent. Further, if we look to natural selection and sexual selection in the biological world, we find some very strange systems. Plants or animals with no mature brain to speak of effectively outsmart species which do have a brain by hijacking the victim species' brain to serve the non-thinking species. So for example, I'm very partial to the mirror orchid, which is an orchid whose bottom petal typically resembles the female of a pollinator species. And because the male in that pollinator species detects a sexual possibility, the flower does not need to give up costly and energetic nectar in order to attract the pollinator. And so if the plant can fool the pollinator to attempt to mate with this pseudo-female in the form of its bottom petal, it can effectively reproduce without having to offer a treat or a gift to the pollinator, but in fact parasitizes its energy. Now, how is it able to do this? Because if a pollinator is fooled, then that plant is rewarded. So the plant is actually using the brain of the pollinator species, let's say a wasp or a bee, to improve the wax replica, if you will, which it uses to seduce the males. That which is being fooled is the more neurologically advanced of the two species. And so what I've talked about, somewhat controversially, is what I call artificial outintelligence, where instead of actually having an artificially intelligent species, you can imagine a dumb computer program that uses the reward through, let's say, genetic algorithms and selection within a computer framework to increasingly parasitize, using better and better lures, fully intelligent humans. And in the case of artificial intelligence, I don't think we're there yet. But in the case of artificial outintelligence, I can't find anything that's missing from the equation. So we have self-modifying code. You have Bitcoin, so you could have a reward structure with blockchains. And there's nothing that I see that keeps us from creating. Now, that is such a strange and quixotic possibility. Now, in this framework, I don't see an existential risk, so that my friends who worry about machine intelligence being a terminal invention for the human species probably don't need to be worried. But I think that there's a lot of exotica around artificial intelligence which hasn't been explored, and I think which is much closer to fruition. Perhaps that's good. Maybe it's a warning shot, so that we're going to find that just as we woke up to Bitcoin as digital gold, we may wake up to a precursor to artificial general intelligence, which alerts us to the fact that we should probably be devoting more energy into this absolutely crazy sounding future problem which no humans have ever encountered.
We should think about the hypothalamus for a bit, because it seems to be pretty damn important. And so I would say, people have wondered sometimes, and they've asked me, where's the superego and the ego and the id located in the brain? And, it's a stupid question, and it's not a stupid question at the same time. It's actually a useful question at one level of analysis, because you could say, well, the id, from the Freudian perspective, is sort of the natural force that propels motivation, And it's, when we say motivation, we're not saying much different than saying id, by the way. It's the same kind of low-resolution word. And it's clearly the case that we have fundamental motivational systems, and that we do share them with animals, and that they do drive our behavior, but they also drive our perceptions in all the ways that Freud thought about. And one of the things I really like about the psychoanalysts is that they never make the mistake of assuming that a motivational system or an emotional system is a mechanical system that reacts deterministically. They say, no, those things are like personalities. And that's much more sophisticated viewpoint than the typical behaviorist or the typical cognitive psychologist, because they tend to think of the computer in either stimulus-response terms, so it's basically deterministic chains, or as if the information processing system is a computational apparatus, which it is, but it's not only that, it's an embodied computational apparatus, and the body is a very sophisticated thing. It's been very difficult for us to build embodied robots. And it's also the case that until you build embodied robots, the things don't really get smart. You have to have a body for the thing to actually have any intelligence. And that was actually figured out by a robotics engineer named Rodney Brooks back in the 1990s, 92, 93. He published a couple of papers on that, saying, that if we were going to build artificial intelligence, we shouldn't start from the top down. We shouldn't build a world modeling machine and then embed it in something that moves around. We should build something that sort of moves around semi-autonomously like a stupid insect. And insects aren't stupid. So I do mean a stupid insect. And if we could manage that, we'd really be doing something. And I think we might have got beyond the stupid insect level of robots so far. And it's starting to ramp up really fast, but it's in large part because the things are embodied. And so, because it is the case, as we've discussed, that your perceptual, your cognitive perceptual motor systems have to be embedded in an output system that can interact with the world in order for them to be doing anything that's actual or real.